Are you confused because a narcissist suddenly stopped contacting you? No explanation. No message. No call. They vanished like they were never even real. And your mind races with questions: why? What did I do wrong? Are they ever coming back? Stop blaming yourself. In today's video, I'm going to expose the dark truth behind a narcissist's silence. Don't be fooled by their cold withdrawal. This isn't a simple ending. It's a manipulative strategy, a psychological power play that you may not even realize is happening. They might be waiting for you to chase, or worse, they've already found a new supply. Even worse, their silence could be a form of punishment, a twisted way to make you feel invisible. Their silence isn't peace, it's control. And if you're wondering whether this is the final goodbye, then stick around. Because the truth might be that you haven't lost anything at all, you might have just escaped a toxic trap. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt lost in a toxic relationship. And don't take your eyes off this video because the truth is about to be revealed. Why haven't they texted me? What happened? Did I do something wrong? If you're feeling anxious, your heart pounding every time you check your phone, blaming yourself for the sudden silence from someone you once felt close to, this isn't just a normal breakup or cooling off. This is a manipulative psychological tactic most commonly used by narcissists. Going silent, also known as the silent treatment, is one of a narcissist's most powerful control tools. They know that leaving you in the dark causes deep emotional instability. And from that instability, you begin to doubt yourself, question your worth, and desperately try to fix something you don't even understand. They don't need to say a word. They just disappear, and you spiral: fear, guilt, longing, confusion. They create the void so you'll fill it with self-doubt and obsession. And when you finally break and reach out, first whether through a message, a call, or even an apology in their mind, they've won the power game. They didn't leave you. They made you chase. In psychology, this is known as control through silence, an indirect form of emotional punishment. No yelling, no insults. Yet the pain runs just as deep. Because in love, silence can scream the loudest. Why do narcissists do this? Because they're not seeking connection, they're seeking control. Every time you show distress, longing, or take initiative, they see it as proof that they still own space in your mind, that they can vanish and you'll still come running. A narcissist's silence is rarely random. It is seldom a sign of respect for your personal space or a moment of introspective pause. In most cases, it is a calculated act, intentional and goal-driven. As previously discussed, one common motive is the desire to exert psychological control by creating emotional voids and uncertainty. However, in some instances, this silence is not merely a tactic of manipulation. It is the result of a shift in internal power dynamics within the narcissist's mind. The second reason they stop contacting you: they have found a new source of supply. Here we are not talking about betrayal in the conventional sense of romantic infidelity, but rather a functional replacement at the psychological level. Narcissists are not emotionally bonded to people, they are bonded to the roles those people play in their emotional structure, mirroring their inflated self-image, meeting their need for control and filling the internal void they constantly carry. When someone no longer fulfills that function, whether because they've become too emotionally aware, started setting boundaries, or simply no longer feel new, the narcissist begins searching for a replacement. The new person is often someone who has not yet seen their darker side, and thus is easier to idealize and control during the early stages. Cutting off contact with you is not an emotional response. It is a logistical transition. It happens abruptly, without closure, and often without emotion, because to the narcissist, you're not a person but a role within their ego maintenance system. Psychologically, this reflects a form of ego displacement, in which the narcissist redirects their need for admiration, reflection, and dominance from one source to another, a source that is currently more efficient and less resistant. What's important to understand is that this silence does not necessarily mark a permanent end. Once the new supply begins to lose its effectiveness, the narcissist may very well return, attempting to reactivate the previous source you if they sense you're still emotionally responsive to them. Their silence, then, is not closure. It is a pause in the cycle of manipulation, unless you actively break the role they are trying to assign to you. However, not all silence stems from the discovery of a new supply. The third reason a narcissist may stop contacting you: they're afraid of being rejected or exposed by you. At first glance, this might seem contradictory. Why would someone who appears confident and self-assured fear rejection? But when you examine the narcissistic psyche more closely, it becomes clear that their self-esteem is not grounded, it's fragile, highly dependent on external validation. In psychological terms, this is known as narcissistic injury, a deep wound to the ego that occurs when someone or something threatens the grandiose self-image the narcissist desperately tries to maintain. Being rejected, called out, or even sensing that you're no longer responding with the same submission as before, any of these can be perceived as a serious threat. Rather than risk that injury, the narcissist opts for a preemptive retreat. This is a classic defense mechanism. Cut you off before you cut them off. By initiating the silence, they preserve a sense of control and avoid the perceived humiliation of being rejected, confronted, or exposed. In their mind, they win because they acted first. They likely sense the shift in you. You've started to see through their patterns. You're less reactive. You've set clearer boundaries. All of these signal that you're no longer easily manipulated, and that makes you dangerous to their false sense of superiority. So before you can walk away, they disappear. And in their eyes, that's a form of emotional dominance, avoiding pain, while still maintaining the illusion of control. At a deeper level, this illustrates how narcissistic relationships are rarely about mutual connection. Instead, they're often defined by a constant calculation of who holds the upper hand emotionally. In this case, their silence is not a manipulative tactic, as in reason 1, nor a logistical switch in supply, as in reason 2, but a defensive reaction, driven by the fear of psychological exposure and emotional vulnerability. Ironically, the more afraid they are of being hurt, the more hurt they inflict on others. As previously analyzed, there are times when a narcissist disappears not because they've won, but because they're afraid of losing. Not because they don't care, but because they're so terrified of emotional injury that they need to retreat in order to protect their fragile ego. But not every silence is defensive in nature. There are moments when silence is used as a weapon, cold, calculated, and cruel. The fourth reason a narcissist stops contacting you: they want to punish you. Unlike retreating out of fear of being hurt, this reason is rooted in hostility and control. The silence isn't to protect themselves. It's to hurt you. This is a subtle yet deliberate form of emotional manipulation known as emotional withdrawal punishment. In psychological terms, this behavior aligns with passive-aggressive control strategies. The narcissist doesn't need to yell or insult you directly. They simply vanish, withdrawing their entire presence from your life, precisely when you are seeking answers, clarity, or even the smallest reassurance about what's going on. What you experience in that moment isn't just sadness from a breakup. It is a quiet form of psychological torture. You are left in a vacuum of confusion, no closure, no understanding of what went wrong, and most dangerously, you start blaming yourself. Why do they do this? Because in their mind, you've dared to cross a line. Maybe you didn't react the way they wanted. Maybe you set a boundary. Maybe you refused to submit. Or maybe you simply showed signs of autonomy. To a narcissist, any behavior that doesn't reinforce their dominance is seen as rebellion and must be punished. Cutting off contact becomes a form of control through deprivation, withdrawing affection, attention, and presence until you're left desperate, disoriented, and unsure. They know very well that humans are most vulnerable in states of uncertainty, and they exploit that, making you feel like the one who did something wrong, like the one who lost something valuable. In many cases, this tactic is designed to pressure you into lowering your standards, apologizing even when you haven't done anything wrong, or compromising your boundaries just to restore the connection. They want you back in a submissive position, and silence is how they reset that power balance. It's important to note, this kind of punishing silence often follows a moment when you asserted yourself. They don't disappear randomly. In their mind, there's a very clear reason: you need to be taught a lesson. They don't need you to understand they're wrong. They just need you to feel guilty enough to chase them. At a deeper level, punishing through silence is a narcissist's way of re-establishing order in the relationship. It allows them to reclaim a power position they feel is slipping. The result: you don't just lose the connection, you also lose your sense of emotional safety, your inner compass, and your confidence. You're led to believe you caused the breakdown when in reality, you're simply dealing with someone who uses distance as a weapon. However, not every instance of a narcissist's silence is a calculated weapon of control. In some cases, their sudden withdrawal isn't about strategy or self-protection, it's simply the consequence of a deeper, fundamental mechanism within their psyche: chronic boredom and the constant craving for stimulation. The fifth reason a narcissist stops contacting you: they're bored and you no longer excite them. What's important to understand here is that narcissists lack the ability to sustain emotional connections based on true intimacy. They don't build relationships through empathy, growth, or mutual understanding. Instead, they seek constant emotional stimulation, intensity, drama, admiration, and above all, novelty. When their supply no longer produces those emotional highs, they begin to feel empty and eventually bored. This boredom isn't like what most people experience in long-term relationships. It reflects an internal instability, where the narcissistic mind cannot tolerate consistency, calm, or emotional neutrality. To them, a relationship that becomes predictable or emotionally balanced is a relationship that's dead. At a core level, they associate love with emotional intensity. They need strong reactions from you to feel significant and powerful. But once you begin to grow emotionally, maintain composure, and stop reacting to their provocations, you become a flat surface, no longer reflecting their inflated self-image. At that point, they don't argue. They don't explain. They simply disappear. No warning, no closure, no emotion. They withdraw as if the relationship never happened. And that cold indifference can be devastating, because it doesn't just erase the connection, it erases you. What's most painful is this: you didn't do anything wrong. You may have loved the right way, been patient, responsible, and kind. But to a narcissist, that becomes dull. They don't seek safety, they seek control, excitement, and emotional chaos. And in that process, you're reduced to background noise, a flatline they abandon to pursue a new surge of emotion elsewhere, even if it's temporary. Many survivors of narcissistic relationships describe this type of silence as cold and sudden, with no clear signs beforehand. Everything seems fine until they're gone, your accounts are blocked, or they've vanished as if they never existed. In reality, this isn't always a premeditated insult. Often, it's a sign of the narcissist's emotional detachment. They no longer get what they need from you: power, emotional reaction, or self-reflection, and they don't know what else to do but withdraw. At a deeper level, this reflects a lack of a stable identity. When they're no longer being mirrored through you, they lose a sense of who they are and move on to the next person who can reflect them anew. In the previous reason, we explored how a narcissist's silence can stem from internal boredom when you no longer provide the emotional stimulation they crave. But in narcissistic psychology, no behavior exists in isolation. Even boredom can become the justification for transitioning into the next phase, erasing you entirely from their emotional landscape. The sixth reason a narcissist stops contacting you: they are wiping you out as part of the devaluation process. If you're familiar with the classic narcissistic cycle: idealization, devaluation, discard, this reason fits precisely within the second and third stages. They've moved past idealizing you, and now, rather than attacking you overtly through criticism or blame, they weaponize complete silence as a colder, more detached form of devaluation. They don't stop contacting you out of anger, fear, or as a manipulation strategy. They stop because they no longer want you to exist in their emotional map. They're deleting you like an obsolete file. Psychologically, this is a defense mechanism typical of individuals with more extreme narcissistic traits. When they can no longer uphold their idealized image of you, perhaps because you've asserted your boundaries, demanded accountability, or challenged their control, their disappointment isn't processed maturely. Instead, they redefine you in their mind as a threat, a source of negativity, or a mistake to be erased. From there, the silence becomes a decision. You will no longer be acknowledged, responded to, or even mentally registered as part of their reality. This behavior often includes signs such as blocking you on all platforms, unfollowing, deleting photos, removing all past posts involving you, treating you as invisible, ignoring any attempt to reconnect, dismissing or rewriting the relationship as though it never existed. To a narcissist, this isn't just how they end things, it's how they rewrite the past. They need to deny that you ever held value, ever impacted them, or ever triggered anything real within them. Because if they admit to that, they also admit you had the power to hurt them, and that, to their fragile ego, is intolerable. Why is this dangerous? Because if you don't understand the psychological mechanism behind it, you can easily fall into the trap of feeling erased, dehumanized, like your existence was meaningless. You may begin to question your memories, your identity, your self-worth. Left unprocessed, this can lead to symptoms of complex PTSD, TPST, and long-term emotional trauma. And what's even more unsettling, this erasure doesn't mean they've truly forgotten you. It means you revealed something they didn't want to face: their flaws, their lies, and their incapacity for genuine connection. They don't go silent because you don't matter. They go silent because you once mattered too much, and that made them feel weak. After the stages of idealization, devaluation, And ultimately, erasure it might seem like the narcissistic manipulation cycle has come to an end. However, due to the narcissist's deeply ingrained need for control and psychological leverage, there is often one final motive behind their silence, particularly after they've vanished without warning. The seventh reason a narcissist stops contacting you: they're waiting for you to come back to confirm they still have control over you. This isn't the same kind of direct manipulation seen in earlier reasons, nor is it the complete discard found in reason 6. Instead, it's an emotional limbo where the narcissist creates an ambiguous silence, an open-ended exit designed to test whether you'll return. And if you do, it serves as proof that you're still under their emotional influence. Here, silence becomes a test, a quiet experiment in control. Even after the discard phase, narcissists often feel the need to keep old sources of supply within reach. So when they go silent without blocking you, without announcing a new partner, without initiating conflict, it may be a deliberate move to monitor your response. They wait for your anger, your sadness, your need for closure, your desperation. If you text something like, "Where are you? Are we okay?" Or "Why are you treating me like this?" in the narcissist's mind, you've just confirmed that they are still at the center of your emotional world. Psychologically, this is known as emotional dependency testing. The narcissist doesn't need to love you to want to own you. All they need is confirmation that you're not over them, that the thought of them still triggers emotion, confusion, pain. And that, for them, is a valuable form of narcissistic supply. What makes this motive particularly dangerous is its ambiguity. They don't fully retreat, but they don't return either. They leave you suspended in a state of anxious waiting, letting your mind spiral through endless speculation. They want you to feel off balance, and that emotional instability often pushes you to be the one who reaches out. And that's exactly what they want. They don't have to return, because you will. When you initiate contact, apologize, show vulnerability, or admit to missing them, the narcissist not only regains psychological control, but also re-establishes their dominant role in the dynamic. The more you pursue, the more they believe they can disappear and reappear at will with no consequences. From that moment on, the cycle begins again. Your return is, in their mind, an unspoken invitation to restart the process of idealization, devaluation, and eventual discard. So if they stop contacting you without reason, with no hostility, no closure, no finality, be cautious. It may not be an ending, but rather a waiting period, where you are the one being tested and observed. When a narcissist stops contacting you, it's almost never random. Whether it's to manipulate, punish, test your reactions, shift to a new supply, or erase you entirely, their silence is intentional. It's a language of control disguised as emotional distance. And if you've ever found yourself trapped in that emotional spiral, wondering whether to wait, chase, let go, or blame yourself, the first thing you need isn't for them to come back. What you need is a clear understanding of what you're actually dealing with. Because only when you realize that, silence isn't a sign of maturity. Their disappearance doesn't define your worth, and your pain doesn't mean you were wrong. Can you begin to shift out of the powerless position they've placed you in? Stop trying to decode their behavior and start decoding your own reactions. What inside you feels compelled to wait, to fix, to crave a response from someone who hurt you? That's where the answer lies, not in their silence, but in your healing. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to continue your journey of awareness and self-protection from toxic relationships. Drop a comment to share your experience or what you've learned, because your voice could help wake someone else up. You don't need closure from the person who hurt you. You need to reclaim your own voice.